the LaxFactor podcast. What is up, college lacrosse fans? You are watching episode number 286 of the LaxFactor podcast. I'm your host, Ted Hoost, and week 0 is upon us. We have an incredible episode waiting for you today, including brilliant insight by me, as always, highlights, and more. Before I get into it, go to LaxFactor.com. Get yourself some swag. You can get yourself the LaxFactor podcast t-shirt. You can watch our episodes here. You can do all sorts of stuff. We even have the strategy and coaching film review, stuff like that. So go to LaxFactor.com. But really all we ask, share the crap out of the show. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Do whatever you can to spread the word about my dopeness. And I'm going to shut up now, and we are going to dive into the first game that I want to talk about today, which is Syracuse and Jacksonville. It was a bad enough beatdown that it was kind of hard to watch at times in terms of just sitting there watching it live and really being able to keep up with what's happening because it was kind of a snoozer outside of Syracuse rolling, which always makes me happy. So I actually had to rewatch it later in the day to come to terms with a few things. Number one, the Syracuse attack, Spallina, Hiltz, and Finn Thompson got to start on attack. He was the third attackman. I heard Thompson had started in the scrimmage, and it was because he owned that position, and they had no choice but to put him there. They did not disappoint. The trio combined for 11 points on the day. Spallina had 3 goals, 2 helpers. Hiltz was 2-2, and then Thompson was 2-1. A very good outing on an offense that is just loaded pretty much 6 guys deep, but you could almost make the argument they're 9 guys deep in terms of offensive prowess when you throw that second midline in. What surprised me was how they put their points up. Hiltz's first goal was a dodge from X up the left side. Just got a step on his guy, and as he was coming up and hit that 5-5, he let it rip. An excellent dodge, had his hands free and everything. Other than that, it was your normal run-of-the-mill tic-tac-toe shit that you've come to expect from these guys overall. The Syracuse midfield, they went 3 lines deep early. I wonder if we'll see that trend continue. Actually, it's rare that you would see a team go 3 lines deep, and Syracuse had that third line in as early as 4-0 in the kind of in the fourth quarter, and then I saw them play a little bit in the second as well. So they got time throughout the game here. So that's something to watch for here in the next game against Vermont, which I think you will almost for sure see that third line factor a little bit. That first line midfield of Leo, Roa, and Sammy English, they combined for 10 points. Leo was 4-1. Roa had 3 goals. English had 2. They combined for 10 all in. This first line is just absolutely filthy, guys. I noticed Roa and Leo far more than English during the telecast. I actually saw English factor quite a bit 2 ways in picking up some ground balls on the defensive side of the ball. He had an incredible clear where he picks a ground ball up, books it, and then ends up splitting 2 dudes with a swim move, which I'm going to show that. Hopefully I remember to show that right here. But all 3 factored. Few doubted them. Everyone was pretty much ready for them to be one of the top 3 midfield units in the country in terms of that first line especially. But today they legitimately looked as good as advertised. Maybe better. Leo nabbed his 5th career hat trick and scored a goal of every variety. He had one off a loose ball, off the dodge, hands free on a man up. You get the idea. This unit is incredible, and I'm excited to be able to talk about them all year. Now that second line, last year that second midfield line had Roa and Stevens on it. This year, Roa gets bumped up to the first line. So the second line consists of Burt Whistle, McCarthy, who actually dodged the ball, carried the ball pretty well. He ends up with 2 assists. Burt Whistle gets 2 goals. And then Trey Deer finally getting his time, 2 goals and 2 helpers on that line. Now, Deer gets a little bit more time than Burt and McCarthy because he plays on the man up as well. But McCarthy, like I said, he looked like he's going to be able to initiate some offense for this line, which is what Roa and Stevens did a season ago. And I presume when this group's on the field, Syracuse will also probably run a little bit more through the attack and things like that. As I mentioned, the third line, Hoddle had a goal. Cordes had an assist. Anderson, big boy, had a goal. I'm surprised that these guys were on the field as early as they were, and that they actually allowed them to initiate some offense. Hoddle, his goal, he scored it early. I think it might have been the 3rd or 4th goal of the game off a dodge, just stuck a corner lefty down that left alley. So I'm not sure how much these guys will end up playing moving forward, especially once we get to that Maryland game, but for sure they have some promise, and we're going to see them next weekend. Probably the next 2 games here between Vermont on Friday and then Towson on Monday, I believe. The Syracuse defense, Figueres, Dwan, and Grace got the starts at close. So Grace ends up filling out that third D position. That makes me very pleased because it really does put our best three cover guys down low. And it takes the defense, I think, from being pretty good with 2 of 3 guys as killers. Now they've got 4 killers down there. They were disruptive all game long. They came out playing well from the outset. At one point towards the end of the first quarter, they forced back-to-back shot clock violations. They forced turnovers. They cleared the ball well, at least in terms of the eye test. Statistically, I didn't really look to see. I think they maybe only had 2 failed clears on the day. In the middle of the field, Mullins looked great at the faceoff dot, although I think he struggled a little bit early. There was a lot of violations early, and it was kind of ugly, and there weren't a lot of clean wins early in the game. But by the end of the game, he, let's see here, the draws were split with Syracuse winning 8 of 15 in the first half. Once Mullins settles down, he ends up going 20 Syracuse won overall 20 to 13 in terms of the draws. Mullins was 14 of 22 on the day, is what it says here. The defensive midfield has been, over the last couple of years, a weakness for Syracuse, and they actually looked very good and like a strength, maybe for the first time in many seasons. Rice was a beast clearing the ball. He had 3 ground balls. Jake Spallina and Sammy English each picked up a GB as well. Again, they weren't really tested. The defense wasn't tested a whole lot, especially not early, but they were active. They got the ball from point A, the defensive side, to point B with ease overall throughout the game. A lot of just full sprint outs up the field, so that was a good sign. All in all, Cuse looked very good. Jacksonville did not look very good. I wanted to make one note. De La Roca, he was hobbled early in the first quarter. I want to say it was the first shot of the game off a Michael Leo shot. He stops the ball, definitely comes up limping, and he limped through the rest of the game. So I want to say credit to him, number one, for having balls and staying in that game when he was pretty much walking around on a peg leg at one point. I would say that had he been healthy, he would have easily stolen a few more goals from Syracuse, and this wasn't necessary. It wouldn't have been quite as insane in terms of 24-5, almost a 20-goal blowout. He was visibly hobbled. Hope he's okay. Next up for Syracuse, Vermont at home. Next up for Jacksonville, home game against Duke, and I don't anticipate that's going to go all that well for Jacksonville. Next game we need to talk about here, number 5, Maryland hosting Richmond. Now, Maryland jumps out to a 7-0 lead by the half, but I was impressed with the Richmond defense, as I think they did a pretty solid job of keeping Maryland at bay, especially over that first quarter. It was 2-0 Maryland at the end of the first quarter. Pretty brutal to watch, actually. And Maryland didn't actually score that second goal until 1 second left in that quarter. Now, that first line midfield for Maryland, very good. Matthew Keegan, the Binghamton transfer that I was excited about, he ends up being their leading scorer on the day. 3 goals, 2 assists. He scored Maryland's first goal of the game, assisted by his line mate Bryce Ford, the Fairfield transfer, who was also looked good. He had 2 goals on the day, and I think an assist as well. Henry Alpa looked like they mixed it up a little bit, so I was having a hard time figuring out who was on that first line completely. So Alpa, I think, might have gotten a couple of runs with him. He didn't have any points off 5 shots, but per the Inside Lacrosse article, it seems like they may have mixed and matched the lines a little bit. But either way, the top 2 guys, Keegan and Ford, looked incredible. Maryland's starting attack, Braden Urksa, Spanos, and Daniel Kelly, they were pretty quiet overall. They had a hard time, it looked like, getting points off of dodges. They combined for 8 overall, and that mostly came in between the second, third, and fourth quarters. But Spanos and Kelly hooked up over Maryland's first goal in the second quarter. That's where the attackman first hit the score sheet. But Hunter Smith, he drew Spanos, or at least at times. He seemed to do a very good job keeping him at bay. But even when Richmond was forced to slide, they were able to recover, either because they were on point, or other times I felt like Maryland, trying to pop the ball around after they drew a slide, just didn't get the ball around enough, didn't throw skip passes. Let's say they were kind of just banging it around the outside, as opposed to trying to throw that skip pass where you can really take advantage of the adjusting defense. So I felt like the Richmond defense played well. I want to watch them in their game next week. Maryland's offense didn't struggle, I would say, because 7-0, that's a commanding lead, and then you win the game 12-7. But I expected that attack unit between Spanos and Urksa, who are both decent carrying the ball. I expected them to do a little bit more than they did. The Maryland defense, though, they were the true story of the day, especially over the first half. For as good as Richmond's defense looked at times, Maryland's defense looked good pretty much the whole game. As we said, they pitched that shutout in the first half, gave up 7 goals over the course of the second half, but they did get a lot of guys in here, and they in terms of just similar to Syracuse, getting some of the young guys time early. That might not continue, but at least for now, Maryland was willing to do that. But they didn't give Richmond anything over the course of that first half. They looked incredible. Logan McNaney, 14 stops against just 6 goals against. He had 6 first-half saves. Quietly, I would say 6 first-half saves. The game was kind of over at the half because it was 7-zip, and the Maryland defense looked incredible. But this is exactly what I was hoping to see out of McNaney. He had a great game. And then specifically to note, Keegan and Ford, they looked great. They looked like Maryland's best offensive players here. And we kind of already know that Spanos and Urksa are both dirty as well. So that's a good sign for Maryland. They got 4 killers offensively at least. And now we can kind of start to see how the other guys will fit in and fill in here overall. So great outing for Maryland. I'm going to watch Richmond very closely next week to kind of try to see how do they do next week. Who do they play next week? Let's check that out because I know I didn't put that in my notes. They've got Robert Morris. So I'm expecting Richmond to whoop up on Robert Morris next weekend. And then they have Virginia the weekend after that. So we'll watch those games, and then that's going to kind of inform us as to what Maryland really looks like coming into that Syracuse game once that drops. Next up, boring, number 7, Duke against Bellarmine. Nothing much to note here. Duke buried him at home. Main thing that surprised me, McAdory was in fact running midfield. I was almost positive that McAdory would end up running attack with the transfers, and that was not the case. He ends up finishing with 3 assists. He looked incredible, and the first 2 assists he had were very good dodges into feeds, but I'm disappointed that he's not going to be on attack and being on the field the whole season. Ben Johnston and McAdory, though, on that first midfield line with Max Sloat, they look very good. Sloat had 2 goals and a helper. As I didn't mention, though, the starting attack ended up being Eric Maliver. He had 4 goals and 2 assists, led the scoring on the day. Luke Graham, the transfer, 3 goals and 2 helpers. So Maliver and Graham, and then the freshman, whose name I forgot. Is it let's see here. I believe it is the Cusalito? Is that the one? I think that's the guy who started on attack there. I believe he's a freshman. He had a goal and 2 assists. But like I said, that first midline, Ben Johnston, McAdory, and Max Sloat, as good as any in the nation. I'm going to put them in the top 5, I think. And it's very plain to see also from this game, do not leave Johnston alone out top with his hands free, because he's going to throw smoke and your goalie is going to start resenting you. And as they say, resentment is one of like the roots of all evil. So do not give Johnston hands free with time and room out top, because he's going to make you pay for it, and he did against Bellarmine early. It's hard to take anything away from a game like this overall. Duke looked a bit careless with the ball, I think, at times, even against Bellarmine's kind of terrible defense. 14 turnovers, 8 of them came in the first half, but that's not unexpected. They've got transfers. You're playing a team that's kind of, you're almost surprised how wide open you are as you're dodging, things of that sort. So that kind of stuff happens. In terms of goalies, they ended up playing both. Patrick Jamieson got time. He only had 3 saves and 1 goal against. Not too bad. And then Buck Cunningham got some time. Apparently, Buck Cunningham has looked good so far this year. 6 saves and 3 goals against here overall. And then at the faceoff dot, kind of mix it up. Cal Gerard, 8 of 12. Luke Engel, I can never pronounce this kid's name. I'm not even going to try it today. He'll just be offended. But yeah, they did okay at the dot. But once again, Duke's another team we're going to watch. A lot of new faces in the ACC. So as they play some tougher competition coming up here, they've got Jacksonville at Jacksonville, and then they play St. Joseph's, Michigan. So I think they'll win. They'll probably be 4-0 heading into Princeton. But that Princeton game, maybe the Michigan game, those should be interesting. I think St. Joe's is going to be down. So that's not one I'm kind of earmarking and excited for here at this point. So let's see how they do next week. Next game we have to talk about, game of the weekend for the most part, outside of the upset that Utah pulled. We'll talk about that later. Number 9, Johns Hopkins went out west, took on Denver, number 10 Denver, and they beat them 13-10. Now, like I said, it did prove to be the game of the week as Hopkins picks up the first, what would you say, they're the first team to pick up a win over a top 10 team. and add that to their resume. They jump out to a 4-1 lead off a Jimmy Ayers goal, assisted by Russell Melendez, an easy drawn dump with Ayers free as he laced it top cheddar. And then Hopkins was up 7-6 when Cody Malosky tied things up at sevens for Denver. Andrew Atchison was dodging up that left side, sees Malosky just fading off the crease. Easy dish. Malosky finishes. And we're good there. Tie score was short-lived, though, because Melendez was mixing it up off another pick slip. I noticed they did that a lot with Melendez, and it was effective. This time he went into the middle of the field instead of banging it back down left. He sees Hunter Chauvette camping on the left wing, hit him. Hopkins is now up 8-7. And then the Jays didn't look back as they jumped out to a 10-7 lead from there, and they go on to win. Melendez ends up with 4 goals and a dish. Hunter Chauvette looked very good, kind of taking on that Degnan role of the lefty sniper, not even just lefty sniper, but even low to high sniper. So Chauvette, 2 goals, 2 helpers. He was great. Matt Collison, the big boy midi, 1 goal, 3 helpers. I think he shot the rock 1 of 10. So he probably wants a few of those back. I believe Milliman even alluded to that in the press conference. So I want to see him shoot the ball better, but hell, you come away with a win on the road. That's tough to do. And he was drawing slides all game long, getting looks. So that'll be good for them moving forward with Collison. In cage, Hopkins, they needed to have continued stability in cage. They got that. Luke Stout, the Loyola transfer, made 12 stops in the net against just 10 goals against a very good team. So Hopkins, they're really the first top 10 team to get truly tested, and they came out shining here with a 13-10 win on the road in Denver. Another keynote, Logan Callahan for Hop, 15-24 in terms of draws, and that possession deficit. That's something that Denver's not used to dealing with. They've been used to winning faceoffs for many years between Trevor Baptiste, TD Erlin, let's not front on Alex Stathakis, who just graduated last year, and all those guys kind of crossed over a little bit. You had Trevor Baptiste and Erlin on I believe, didn't they play on the same team together? And then you had Erlin and Stathakis, and then just Stathakis, and now they've got nobody, so they struggled in the middle of the field as Callahan kind of dominated, and Hopkins had a big possession disparity. So huge edge for Hopkins in that game at a time when they needed it against a very good opponent on the road. Next game that we have to talk about is Georgetown and Loyola. Now, things were looking really dicey early in this game for Georgetown as Loyola comes out quick and they jump out to a 4-1 lead with about 3 minutes or so left in that first quarter. It was the Matthew Minikis show early as he had a pair of goals over Loyola's 3-goal stretch that gave them that lead. Now, that glimmer of hope that Loyola clung to by the end of the first quarter, that happiness was completely dashed by the Hoyas after that, as the Hoyas go on to score 6 consecutive goals en route to a 7-4 lead with 12:48 left in that third quarter. So Loyola, they'd answer with a couple of goals to get back to within 1, but Georgetown scored another 6 unanswered. Game of runs for them. And that was all she wrote for Loyola. Now, I had questions about the Georgetown offense and what was that going to look like in terms of who was going to do the scoring for Georgetown. They've been continually beefing up their roster via the transfer portal, especially offensively. And this is the first year no one could just totally beef up their rosters, or at least Duke and Virginia and Maryland. They stole all the good offensive transfers from everybody else. So those questions were kind of answered, though. Fulton Bayman, he was a Notre Dame transfer. He went for 2 goals and 2 assists. Aiden Carroll, the guy I assumed would have a monster day, quiet, just a goal, 2 assists off 3 shots. So they keep Carroll bottled up, but Georgetown got enough scoring from everybody else. Joe Caesar, Kevin Miller, a freshman, actually, they each donated a hat trick on offense to this cause, and that proved to be too much for Loyola's defense, which kind of struggled handling them after that quick start. Anderson Moore, he had a great day in cage for Georgetown, 14 saves against 6 goals against. Now, important to note that despite a hot start for Loyola, Moore didn't come out well. He came out cold. Or no, despite that hot start from Loyola, Moore came out hot as well. He had 5 stops over that first quarter where Loyola scored those 4 goals. So without him coming out like that, you could make the argument Loyola could have taken like a little bit larger of a lead, and that may have changed how Georgetown was able to settle in and start putting up points. The Hoyas defense, they were the problem here. They struggled early. They cleaned things up over the second and third quarters, only allowing 7 shots on cage over that stretch. So what looked like it was going to be a really tough day for Georgetown's defense and for their offense ended up not being so. It ended up being a big positive as once they settled down, showing resilience in being able to settle settled down after that first quarter, and then they just got a lot of stops, and boom, we're back in the game. I can't say enough about Ross Prince, the Georgetown faceoff guy. He goes 16 of 20, which helped make sure things stayed reasonable, especially in that first quarter again. Prince won all 11 first half faceoffs. He won all the faceoffs in the first quarter, and Loyola still, even with that possession disparity, managed to rattle off a bunch of goals. So what's this tell us about Loyola? I don't know. They seem to be a good lacrosse team. They just struggled against Georgetown here in this case, and I don't know how good Georgetown is. We're going to still have to see. Up next for Georgetown is Johns Hopkins on the road, and then up next for Loyola is Maryland at home. So both of them are going to be tested, and we're going to be able to find out what the hell are these guys about here coming next week. Next up, Penn State and Colgate. Now, I had this game down as one of my upset alerts, and while Penn State did manage to pull out the 14-9 win, I still think Colgate showed a lot of balls, and they played well. The Red Raiders, or whatever the hell their mascot is, they're going to be sneaky good, as I said. They bring almost everybody back from their team a season ago, which was pretty solid. What were they a year ago? I'm just curious. 2024. They were 8-7 a season ago, playing a fairly tough schedule. So let's watch Colgate, because I think this was a solid outing for them, despite the fact they upset Penn State last year and weren't able to pull it off this year. It was the Matt Trainer show, as the preseason All-American put up 5 goals and 2 helpers off 13 shots. The scoring behind him filled out nicely, so Penn State ended up being okay on offense after all, at least against Colgate. We see here Kyle Lehman 2-1. You see just a bunch of guys factoring. Kyle Aldridge, just a buttload of dudes with 2 points. Can't be bad. They controlled the ball, Penn State did, from the outset. They went up 3-2 early in the second quarter and then never relinquished that lead. The defense struggled badly a season ago when they lost this game to Colgate. They had a solid day on Saturday. Alex Ross, Kevin Parnham, and Will Costin combined for 7 caused turnovers. Jack Frassion made 13 saves against 9 goals against yesterday, whereas a season ago he was also god-awful. The Penn State defense and Frassion, they all played poorly in the upset loss to Colgate last year, so they got their shit together this year. They pull off a win. Kobe Baldwin, worth noting, also at the faceoff dot. He won 15 of 24 draws, had a great day as well. So boom, Nittany Lions are 1-0. Who do they have next? They have they have Villanova at Villanova next, and Colgate is at Virginia next weekend. So that's going to be a rough one here for the Red Raiders. But once again, it'll tell us what are they legit? You know, how do they really look? Penn State, we know, was probably going to be middle of the pack here in the Big Ten. Virginia is expected to kind of be middle of the pack in the ACC. So I'll be watching closely how Colgate performs down there. Next game we have to talk about, Michigan Marquette. Now, Michigan thrashed them at home. I have pretty much nothing to say about this one. Ryan Cohen and Jack Jenkins each put up a pair of goals and assists. Hunter Taylor faced 11 shots and stopped 11 of them. Not terrible, considering you're not able to settle in when the opposing team is as bad as Marquette was on this day. Jack Weller, who takes over Fogo duties for Michigan, he wins 12 of 18 draws, and really, I mean, I got nothing else to say about this one. Who cares? Michigan beat the crap out of them. Oh, you know what? I do care one thing. Who's Michigan got next week? North Carolina at North Carolina. So we're jumping right into some solid games here for next week. Now, I thought there was a smidge of a chance here that Utah could play spoiler on the road to Ohio State, but I didn't really think that was going to happen. I figured the big school was going to win the game in the end. So if you told me Utah had won this game, I would have told you what, by 1 or 2? If you had asked me what the spread was, and I'd have been very wrong. 19-13, Utah puts it on Ohio State at Ohio State's place. They jumped out to a 6-2 lead by the end of the first. They held a 9-7 lead at the half, and at no point found themselves behind in this game. Credit Utah's Tyler Kalekel, who won 21 of 29 faceoffs for the Utes. He also put up a goal and an assist with 9 ground balls, so that kid at the faceoff dot had a monster day. I feared that Ohio State would have a hard time finding their identity offensively with Jack Myers gone, and that proved to be true as they struggled all day to find quality looks. They only put up 25 shots on cage to Utah's 34. So, as you're looking at the box score in this one, nothing really stuck out in favor of Utah outside of the score and then that face-off dominance. That was pretty solid here. But what I saw of the game, it just every time Ohio State would get back in the game and they'd get it back to close, Utah had an answer. They just kept getting looks, and those looks eventually went in. Cody Hart was 4-1 for Utah. Ryan Steins, the ASUN preseason offensive player of the year, he was 2-3. Luke McNamara, the freshman, 5 goals. So that's not too bad. They paced the Utes. They made the Ohio State defense look generally silly. Luke Pavetta forced 3 turnovers on the defensive end of the field for Utah. Garrett Haas went for 4 goals and a dish for the Buckeyes, but not a whole lot to be happy about here for Ohio State, and they lose. So that is it for the games that I wrote up. So now we're going to go to the fly by the seat of my pants portion of the show, where we're going to kind of look at some other games that I probably should have talked about and didn't. So let's see here. With Lafayette, this was one I did not pick. Lafayette comes in and beats Air Force. That is surprising. I actually thought this might be a slightly closer game. Looks like Bucknell had other plans here because they put it on Merrimack 23-7. Connor Davis 8-1, Michael Meyer 4-4, Will Hopkins 3-2 for Bucknell. That's absolutely incredible. Bucknell goalkeeper, mediocre. Well, we had Parker Day here, 5 saves to 1 goal against, so that's probably the starting goalkeeper there. They dominated the faceoff dot pretty badly too, although Colin McCloy here, at the party after the game, assuming this was a home game here, I think they should have probably chirped McCloy a little bit. But yeah, Bucknell absolutely demolished Merrimack here. Mercer beat up on Hampton. High Point Navy. This was one I was curious about. I didn't even end up reading the article about it, so I'm going into this one completely blind here. High Point, new head coach, new offense, just a complete kind of list of new faces just due to graduation and things of that sort. So my question going into this one was, knowing Navy's going to be a quality team from a good conference, how is that going to pan out for High Point with a new coach and kind of a new roster to a degree here? And not too badly. Navy is 1-0. High Point come out, though, and put up a good game. Carter Ash led everybody with 3-1. Jack Ponzio, 2-2, both for Navy. And then from a goalie perspective, Dan Daly, 12 saves against 10 goals against. Face-off dot perspective, ooh, here we go. High Point, Luca Accardo. He wins 14-24 for High Point, so that's a bright spot for them overall. But Navy does win the game 14-10. Hofstra thrashed Iona 20-2. Iona, the new first-year D1 program, they get waxed. Providence beat Holy Cross. That's not a surprise. This was another one here. Lehigh and Rutgers ended up being a very good game. I think the story of this game, per what I read, was Lehigh did a terrible job clearing the ball. I think they failed on like 50% of their clears over the course of the game, or maybe it was over the course of the first half. They cleared it up in the second half a little bit, but that caused a deficit that they could not climb out of here. Colin Kelly, 3 goals on the day, and then I believe Carden Stoller had a good game. 10 saves against 6 goals against. So Rutgers' story of the day ended up being their ride, and because you got to give them credit for that. And then Lehigh just kind of struggled from there. So that's going to hurt you. Let's see. Queens, Mount St. Mary's beat Queens 14-9. We talked about these. We talked about that. Yeah, we've talked about everything, guys. Now let's just see. Do we have a game today? I felt like we did have one game today. Here's this glitch. Hey, Terry Foy, if you're looking at this, I can't get myself further on the scores, so let's check the calendar. St. Bonaventure hosting VMI today at 11 o'clock. So by the time you're watching this, that game will be hitting. And then we have some weekday games here that we can look forward to, because we got Ohio State playing Tuesday against Detroit Mercy, Rutgers taking on LIU at home, and then the big one here is going to be number 17 Towson against number 8 Johns Hopkins. I don't think that was Hopkins number 8. I could have swore Hopkins was number 9. So I don't know where they're getting number 8 from. Now we got to look at this. Am I a moron? And I don't even know what the poll says. Did I get that wrong? Oh, yeah. Johns Hopkins is number 8. I called him number 9. My bad, folks. Number 8, Johns Hopkins. What an insult. How could I insult them like that? All right, let's get back to this. So, yeah, that's going – whoop, geez, knocked my phone over here. That's going to be a good one here come Tuesday. And then Friday, I'm pumped because I have Syracuse lacrosse on Friday and Monday as Syracuse hosts Vermont. That's going to be an absolute bloodbath. We have a full slate of games next week as we look through what we have to look forward to. Number 12, Army at UMass. That should be a good one. We have Colgate at Virginia, Duke at Jacksonville. Who else looks good? Michigan at North Carolina, so that's going to be a battle of top 20 teams. Who else? Boston U should beat up on Siena, although that we don't know. Oh, yeah, Georgetown at Hopkins on Saturday. That's going to be a big one. Hopkins really testing themselves early. They beat the number 10 team in the country yesterday, and then they're going to play number 11. But I believe Georgetown's going to bump up, so you're going to see Denver drop. So Georgetown for sure will slip into the top 10, so Hopkins has a chance to get their second top 10 win of the season. Maryland at Loyola should be a hell of a game. Stony Brook at Rutgers. Stony Brook can put a solid team on the field. So this is going to be another good early test for Rutgers. Denver gets to take on Air Force. I think Denver is going to roll and get some revenge in that one. I believe Utah is going to be able to take out Delaware. We're going to preview these games greater. I just wanted to rip through them here today. So that seems to be Saturday's slate of games. And that is it, folks. I'm going to put out we'll put out the preview show here. We'll talk about some of the weekday games. So Wednesday's preview show will recap Tuesday's games and then do previews for Saturdays for the weekend's games coming through Friday through Monday and all that crap. So we'll do all that. As I always say, please go to LaxFactor, buy yourself a t-shirt, just visit the site, watch the videos, share the videos, don't skip ads. Help me out here. If an ad plays, be a man or a woman and watch the hell out of that ad. Get me some revenue here. It's not hard to get me revenue. You could just watch the ads, share the show with your friends, and if you have some extra money in your pocket and you're willing to spend it during these tough economic times, go to laxfactor.com and do it that way. So that's it. Come back Wednesday for the recaps for Tuesday's games and for the preview for next weekend. I am your host, the wonderful Wizard of Hoost, and I am out. The LaxFactor Podcast.